The crypto industry can't seem to stop winning in the United States. All of this winning is becoming exhausting at the legislative level. We have the Genius Stablecoin Act passing out of committee and onto the Senate floor. Also, the controversial DeFi broker rule that passed through the Senate now passing through the House as well. Price may be flat, but it's fair to say that we're getting everything we want in the halls of Washington at the moment. Those are just a couple of the big stories from this week that we're going to unpack. NLW and I bring you the Friday Five. Let's go.
Let's go.
What is up, everybody? I'm Scott Melker, also known as the Wolf of Wall Streets. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. You know, I tried to quote a little Trump there at the beginning. Just all this winning, so much winning.
I mean, well, also there's the amazing pun of the Stable Act and then the Genius Act, which when brought together become the Stable Genius Act.
And we know that has to be on purpose because we have a stable genius president.
Has to be.
Has to be. So what we're talking about here, for those who don't know, the stablecoin bill clears Senate Banking Committee, and there's no thing there. There it is. The stablecoin bill clears Senate Banking Committee. This is obviously that Genius Act that you mentioned, brought to us by Hagerty. Interestingly, obviously, this committee was yesterday. We all know who sits on this committee and is no longer the chair. It's Elizabeth Warren. And man, she was visibly shaken if you watch this, especially because a number of Democrats flipped against her obvious wishes and voted for this, making it a bipartisan passage out of the Senate Banking Committee. This is just one of many pieces of stablecoin legislation floating around, but this one seems to have the best shot right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the new divide in Congress, which for those who have been watching closely over the last few years was always lurking under the surface. The new divide is not strictly or always Democrat versus Republican. It's an age gap, man. If you look, it's the youngest members of the Democrats are flipping en masse and just don't care about the crusades of these boomers is the short of it. You know, they're interested in charting an independent path. They believe what they believe. Digital assets aren't weird and scary to them. They make total sense because they grew up with the internet. And now, you know, we've got these folks who are in their, 40s or even their late 30s who are just not towing the party line. Also, at this point, if you're an independent thinker, how far has the party line gotten you recently with if you're a Democrat? So it's interesting to watch, but the grip on power and cohesion certainly on these issues I think is slipping in. And you got to think, not to get too generally political for a minute, that part of the challenge is, my guess is that a lot of the traditional Democratic power brokers assumed that in the wake of a second Trump administration, it would just be all anti-Trump all the time, right? Like, toe the line, everyone against it. And when you've got all these common sense issues that are coming up where that's not the case, it really throws into chaos that whole strategy. So it's pretty interesting to watch. And obviously for us, a very good thing, to see that independence being asserted.
I hadn't even thought about the young-old divide in quite a while, but I think you're absolutely right. I actually had Richie Torres over a year ago on Crypto Town Hall and asked him the question, why is crypto so controversial? Why is it seemingly such a pro-crypto right and an anti-crypto left? He says it is not. It is that there's a bunch of old people and young people, and the young people in both parties get it. He said the exact same thing, and he is arguably the most forward-thinking young Democrat on crypto.
I believe, I'm not sure, someone can probably check this in the comments, but I believe that I read that I think it was half the Dems flipped on the Senate Banking Committee to support pushing this through. I think it was literally age lines. It was like the four youngest Democrats voted, to move this through, and the four and the older Democrats didn't. Someone check that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. So, even if it's not exactly that, I think the broader point certainly remains the same when you dig into the numbers more directly.
Yeah, the vote was 18-6, so this was a landslide victory for this to pass through committee, and I think there's an expectation it will see that reflected probably on the Senate floor. We'll get into the DeFi Act later, but having seen bipartisan support for that, this is arguably less controversial, and I think that leads to the next part of this conversation is what's actually in this bill. I have not personally read the entire thing. I just go to Eleanor Terrett and others to dig into it. But this seems, as she says here, that they've expanded beyond the original February text to include reserve requirements, supervision, anti-money laundering, and counterterrorism features, sanctions, compliance standards, liquidity requirements, and risk management standards to facilitate international transactions and interoperability with United States dollar-denominated payment stablecoins issued overseas. That's a shout out to Tether, right?
Yeah. So I think one of the parts of conversation, obviously, lots and lots to like in this. I think that a couple things that people are watching. One is how restrictive in terms of issuers is legislation going to be. One of the things that Democrat versions of this bills have tended to include in the past is really limiting it to banks and traditional financial institutions in a way that sort of makes it anti-competitive with existing crypto players. So that's something that people are trying to work to, again, have a fair playing field. The second piece is, and this one I think is going to be a little bit harder to whittle down, a real pro-US based issuers thing. Like it seems like these bills are going to be passed with strong preferential treatment for US companies. And look, obviously the biggest implication for this is Tether, full stop, right? And how, where it's going to sit for them. I think that if you are in the camp that everyone should have equal access to compete, and that by virtue of offering US dollar stable coins, they're already playing in the US dollar ecosystem, and that shouldn't be a limiting factor if they're not a US based company. It is good news that Paulo was walking around Washington, D.C. I think that's a thing that about 2 years ago, people would have assumed would never happen, right?
I did not realize until I read his comments yesterday that he had never visited the United States since creating Tether. Maybe never at all, but he said I've never been to Washington, the United States, because I thought I'd get arrested.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
exactly.
Pretty big sea change.
Yeah, exactly. So there's positives there, but boy, if you're paying any attention to any part of this administration, I think the likelihood that you don't see some amount of preferential treatment in legislation for US based companies is very, very low. It's just what's happening right now across every spectrum, every industry. So, that's
made in the USA cryptocurrencies. I mean, we've seen it already, but to that end though, my instinct, my gut says that they'll find a way for Tether to domicile in some way, shape, or form in the United States, or work with Cantor Fitzgerald or a bank to make it more USA based. I just think that's
absolutely
that's the inevitable.
There are paths. I mean, this like, remember the made in USA is not about cutting out the rest of the world. It's about forcing the rest of the world to slap on an Uncle Sam t-shirt and an American hat and rock and roll. That's what the goal of the policy is. So you would think that there's going to be pathways for Tether to, slap on an AK-47 and a bald eagle and get ready to go.
I can't wait to see the French riding around in pickup trucks, drinking Bush beer, listening to Miranda Lambert or whatever people do. I don't know, probably the wrong example, but singing songs about their dogs dying. And
that sounds like my summer in a couple months. I'm looking forward to it.
And you know what? It's going to be a great all-American summer you're going to be having. For the record, we do have Scott here. Mark Warner, Old, and the 4 youngest Democratic senators on the committee across the floor.
Yep, there you go. You guys think I'm joking. I am 100% not joking. That will be me in 3 months.
That this is my wife's entire side, like family, huge family, all worked on farms and grain of the earth Americans. I love getting out there and experiencing the real America. Just to put a bow on the quick conversation here about stable coins. So Haggerty himself said this is about improving transaction efficiency, freeing up working capital, driving U.S. Treasury demand. Then we have an article, Momentum Builds in Washington to pass stablecoin legislation, marking a moment for us here in Congress now to act. I think it's very clear that this is the time this needs to get done because it does have the tailwinds. And then, of course, you even have Bessent, who's the Secretary of the Treasury, saying that the U.S. will use stablecoins to ensure dollar hegemony, which is something that Paulo's actually said for years. Like, listen, this is about hyper-dollarization, not hyper-Bitcoinization. It's not about crypto. We're buying your treasuries and spreading the dollar all over the world.
I mean, this is something that people in the crypto industry who are, focused on stablecoins, who are advocates of stablecoins, have said for years, that the biggest countervailing force to questions of the U.S.'s status, of the U.S. dollar status as the world's global reserve currency, is the rise of U.S. dollar denominated stablecoins, right? Because who cares about the concern of Russia sanctions if you can still access dollar stable coins and pay with the thing that everyone already accepts, right? It is a huge, huge force for kind of, it extends the US dollar's hegemony for at least another generation. And that is now officially, from the very top, an administration talking point that's now being parroted by folks in Congress, in the Senate, who are advocating for this. That is a monumental change, a super obvious one. It's not being noticed because it's such a duh sort of statement, but really, really big change.
Yeah, I mean, you have the guys who literally are in charge of the dollar talking about
I mean,
stable coins.
Europe's
the dollar.
Europe's freaking out about it. Christine Lagarde is accelerating the Euro CBDC because they're concerned that all of this, that US dollar denominated stablecoins, is going to threaten their hegemony. There's someone, and I apologize for not having the exact quote because it was an epic tweet, but it was like, pretty funny that that entire continent's monetary sovereignty is being threatened by fake internet money.
Well, listen, I think we've made it then. If Lagarde's having to push forward to CBDC because of Tether, then I would say that the cryptocurrency industry is at the forefront now. Listen, we mentioned this before last week, that the U.S. Senate passed a resolution to kill the unworkable IRS DeFi broker rule. That was huge news. We don't need to talk about it again, especially how bipartisan it was and how many Democrats flipped, a reflection of what's likely to happen with the Stablecoin Act. Well, now we have the U.S. House following the Senate and passing the resolution to kill the IRS DeFi broker rule. A bipartisan majority in the U.S. House of Representatives voted to repeal the so-called IRS DeFi broker rule. And you can see Congressman Mike Carey here celebrating on the floor of the House that this bill was passed and is heading to POTUS's desk to be signed into law. Look, now we got one past both houses.
And this, the only notable thing here is that it was an even bigger majority, even broader number of Democrats crossing the aisle to vote for this one.
Absolutely. So listen, we'll move on to the next story, which I think, I don't know how to title this one. We could say, we have recession jitters, money screaming out of ETFs, tariff mayhem, 200% on wine coming from Europe. Good thing I enjoy wines from Napa and Sonoma. And we have good wine here in the United States. But clearly the market, for a moment, hitting a correction yesterday on the S&P, down over 10% from the peak. Complete mayhem in markets. Many saying that that's obviously Trump's fault with the lack of certainty as to what he's going to do. But now we are also talking about the risk of recession. Now, Arian obviously saying 25 to 30%. Trump saying, nah, dude, no recession coming. Downplays market turmoil. I don't care about markets. And then you jump over to JP Morgan, who's saying they see a 40% chance of a U.S. recession, and that's due to exorbitant privilege. What the hell is going on with our economy?
We talked about this before. We'll mention it again. Trump weaponizes chaos because he thinks that he does better in chaos than anyone else. Got some good evidence for that. Even beyond that, though, in this particular circumstance, it feels very clear that Trump 2.0 is very serious about this sort of global economic realignment. It seems like they're very serious about really trying to push through some fundamental changes to how the U.S. economy is structured. I think that a lot of people thought that these things were just bargaining chips, and certainly some of the early evidence with tariffs suggested that they were. But then you got Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, going on mainstream TV talking about how they'd like every country to pay a membership fee to the American economy so that earners making less than $150,000 a year don't have to pay income taxes. And what he said this week was, we've had taxes for so long, income tax for so long, that we've been Stockholm syndromed, like it's a normal thing or a good thing. And, look, whether you think that they can pull anything like that off or not, I think at this point you have to believe, or it's on you if you're not taking them seriously. And however serious they are, they've clearly made a determination that now early pain is the way to do this, right? Maybe that's a calculus about the midterms. Maybe that's just a calculus about when they have the political clout to move really dramatic changes in. But they have clearly decided that pain now is worth it for what they're trying to achieve. my sense is too, and there's nothing that they've said that I think indicates this. I just, markets always freak out when they don't know what's going on. And speaking of Stockholm syndrome, there is a chance, I think, over the next couple of weeks that markets get used to being absolutely pummeled by these completely what were previously out of left field policies. And they actually just get used to Trump dumping on them incredibly hard and start to rationalize again because they're like, oh, cool. We, the beatings will continue until morale improves and they'll just chill out. Like part of what we're seeing right now is, this feeling of uncertainty. Once the pain becomes certain, we might level off a little bit. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see. Look, if you watch any sort of, news analysis from any political perspective, the big question is there a strategy behind it or not? You ask two people, you get three opinions, but what's for sure is that no one has any goddamn idea what's going on. And markets are not gonna thrive in that, in that sort of environment.
Yeah. It's pretty wild though, that Trump aside, there's a pattern. I've showed the chart 100 times. I mean, I could bring it up very quickly, but you get an inverted yield curve. Yield curve normalizes. That's blue. The Fed pivots in red, and then the stock market corrects. Every single time for the last 30 years. Well, the yield curve uninverted, the Fed pivoted, and now the stock market's correcting. And by the way, then it goes back up.
Yeah.
So even if you take out all the insanity, I think you could say that he inherited a situation right now where at some point there had to be a correction, and for him, better now at the beginning of his term.
Totally. One thing that's interesting too is it's been sort of another part of the conversation is crypto has been hit worse, right? I mean, stocks have corrected, but there's a bunch of different indicators, right? Like I think last month, Robinhood trading was off something like 29% for stocks, or 29% for crypto, but only 1% for stocks, right? Yeah. And I was talking with someone yesterday about what is going on, and I think Travis Kling was also talking about this. We are now reaping, I think, the pain of having not brought in any new market participants over the course of this cycle, right? There is no internal catalyst whatsoever for any excitement. There's no one new here with fresh eyes, and full wallets. There's no exciting new theme like NFTs or DeFi in the past or ICOs before that. There's just us who have been here painfully for, the last few years. And all of our hopes and dreams were based on sort of narratives and policy, which turns out like policy's going about as good as it could have been. And it's still not enough for us. So there's clearly some like more fundamental underlying things. And I think that it's very difficult to have all catalysts have to be external, right? And we're seeing that now, like everything is going about as well as it could, and it's still not enough. We need more people in.
The Solana meme coin casino is like the digital Donner Party.
Yeah.
It's just everyone who's left starving and eating each other until there's nothing. I mean, it's really the same people who were here 4 years ago, just taking out 25, 30, 40% more of the participants by dumping on each other.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I was thinking about too, from a just what we should expect standpoint, obviously I was very close to this, but after the FTX implosion and the revelations, everyone was talking about how many years this was going to set us back with how far back the crypto industry was going to be set in America, right? And everyone was saying, this sets crypto back 5 years. And I think that we forgot that somewhere along the way, because just a few months after that, BlackRock stepped in and planted its flag and said, Bitcoin ETF is coming, and we're, sorry, you don't get to slide anymore. And the institutions came along with, Uncle Larry Fink, and institutions have been less freaked out this whole time and have been sort of positioning. And then things went good with the administration. We forgot that for normal people, I think that we kind of are on that 5-year timeline. And they still remember, it's still fresh. And by the way, the more that Sam pops up doing stupid interviews, the more they're going to remember that they think this whole industry is BS,
Yeah. And that's the people outside. They remember the sentiment and don't want to enter. And then you have to remember that a meaningful percentage of people who actually were in have missed out on the ability to participate because they lost all their money on these platforms.
Yep. Yeah. So
or at least are just getting a percentage of it back now. But
yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, it's just I think the point is, we've been struggling. There's this constant kind of undercurrent conversation over the last couple months of, why are things going so well, but everyone feels so bad? And the reality is that when it comes to the internals of this house, it's not structurally strong right now, right? There's not capital, there's not new people, there's not new themes. So it does, like, ultimately you can't have a full true bull market without the inside and the outside working together, and we've only got the outside right now. And holding aside that half of the outside is also the macro scene, which is just causing chaos for everyone. So it's a tough situation.
My brain doesn't want to agree with you, but my portfolio certainly does. And speaking of outside catalysts and things that were heavily hyped, we had the crypto summit on Friday, right after we recorded the last show. 3 takeaways from the White House crypto summit here. Now, listen, I would almost argue that there were kind of no takeaways from the crypto summit, right? Donald Trump walked in the room, the part that was televised. Everybody kissed the ring, told him how wonderful he was, thanked him. Nothing was actually discussed, but apparently behind closed doors, behind that, they did talk about the strategic reserve, the digital asset pile, which now we know are real things, that there's actually a U.S. digital asset strategy, which I think is important, and that crypto audits are becoming a priority. But it seems like this meeting was an excuse to get everyone together to signal that the government is very serious about our issues, but that it was preempted largely by the executive order the day before. So I don't know if there was anything new in this meeting, but still, to me, it's a massive, massive signal that Donald Trump himself, David Sachs, Lutnick, Bessent, all of them took the time to actually sit down with the leaders of our industry and the leaders from a cross section of our industry, not just Bitcoiners or just exchange heads, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, look, the only takeaway that mattered was that the thing existed and it was, populated with who it was populated with. And if you've ever watched any other summit at the White House, I don't know what you thought was going to be different about this one. The main policy was introduced the day before. I think, I've been screaming and squawking all week about why I think that people should be excited about how the BSR was set up rather than frustrated by it. But again, it just shows, I think, as you can probably tell, my base case is that the frustration that people are feeling is the fact that none of these external catalysts actually can do anything to outweigh the internal challenges right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the final story that's probably worth discussing here is all things Binance, and more specifically, all things investments into Binance. So we have Abu Dhabi's MGX makes record $2 billion investment into Binance. MGX is, I believe, effectively owned by the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund. It's not the wealth fund itself, as many have said, but I think that's slightly semantics. This was $2 billion in stable coins. It was paid, leaving many to question why Binance would take money when we know that they're flush with cash. So what's the strategy here? Interestingly, this news, I think, broke on Wednesday. I, for the first time, sat down with Richard Tang on Tuesday and asked him a whole bunch of questions about Binance's future. And at no point did he even hint to the fact that they were going to be taking any investment. So I got nothing out of him, is basically what I'm saying. And the news hadn't dropped. He was very, very tight-lipped about this. But many saying that this is more a signal that Abu Dhabi wants to become the financial capital of the world. Binance, crypto or otherwise, is one of the largest financial institutions on the planet. And this is a path for Binance to eventually go public in Abu Dhabi, which would be a huge coup to have them there. Many wondering, though, why Binance would do it. What's the angle there?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things. One, if you think about the size and scope of the investment, on the one hand, $2 billion, the biggest crypto fundraising round we've ever seen. On the other hand, when it comes to the valuation of this company, Coinbase is valued at about 50 billion or something like that now.
This
so
is
it's
sub 5%, I bet.
Right,
I don't know
exactly.
what the valuation was,
This
but it's
is
probably sub 5%.
This is an investment that, sure, maybe there are some positive balance sheet shore ups in the wake of paying a big fine to the US government or something like that. I'm not discounting the value of having an extra $2 billion kicking around. But it's pretty clearly about other strategic purposes and sized as such. So what might those be? Well, from Binance's perspective, they are trying to, they have been on this long-term journey to move away from remote, man with no home to actually domiciled in a place. This is a much closer connection to a specific, government and regulatory jurisdiction that they can potentially call home in a bigger way. I think something like a fifth or a quarter of Binance's employees are based in that area. So that's one thing. A second thing is, just from a sheer legitimacy standpoint, Binance has done a lot to weather a storm. Like CZ went to jail, guys. Like it was not a nothing
Casual
burger.
$4 billion they paid.
Yeah, like and look, FTX didn't come back after its founder went to jail. Binance is still the biggest exchange in the world, and they are trying to reposition for the next generation of the company. And this sort of like very kind of institutional integration is potentially a way that they're positioning for that. The third piece, which I find most interesting, is actually the part that's on Abu Dhabi side, not Binance's side, which we're getting into, which is two things going on. One, there is extreme competition in the Gulf states for who's going to be the new financial capital of the Gulf. Is it going to be Riyadh? Is it going to be Abu Dhabi? Is it going to be Dubai? Or is it going to be some combination, right? And so each of those different the places are kind of making their bid. Second piece is there is a serious, obviously, geopolitical realignment happening between the U.S. and China, where the Gulf states are one of these key battlegrounds. And you've seen this play out specifically with AI, right? For a while, the Gulf has been very good at playing both sides, being able to do business with both sides. And over the last year or so, you've seen the US, as they increase export restrictions on AI chips to China, putting incredible pressure on the Gulf states to turn officially towards them and away from China. Right. You saw this with G42 last year, where, Microsoft took a minority stake in them. They invested about 1.5 billion. By the way, this is an ex crypto person who runs G42 as well. He was at MicroStrategy, believe it or not. And the G42 basically had to say, got it, we can't do business with both sides. We're going to be a US focused company. And so I think there's a bit of that going on too, where, it's a stable coin transaction. They're bringing this huge financial institution in. Basically, I think that this is not only Binance getting closer to Abu Dhabi. I think it's also, the Gulf states continuing to turn towards the U.S. as well. So be interesting to see. That could be completely wrong. They're obviously keeping their optionality open, but it's one more indicator of how the geopolitical sands are shifting right now.
Speaking of things that are apparently completely wrong, the final Binance news we have here is the Wall Street Journal yesterday with this breaking huge news. Trump family has held deal talks with Binance following crypto exchange's guilty plea, basically hinting that CZ was looking for a pardon in exchange for allowing the Trumps to invest in some way, shape, or form in Binance US specifically, which, by the way, the exchange is still ticking on and still to this day is theoretically a completely separate entity from Binance, much like OKCoin was with OKX and theoretically FTX US was with FTX, although we know that was not the case. But this is not really CZ's company per se. And then right after that, Bloomberg, Trump Crypto Venture, has talked to Binance about doing business. And even before that Bloomberg article dropped, CZ, sorry to disappoint, the Wall Street Journal article got the facts wrong. Here you go. Fact: I have had no discussions of a Binance US deal with, anyone. Complete FUD. And then he went on to say, ×2 FUD with a history, and said that Bloomberg was the other media post with a baseless hit piece after the Wall Street Journal, and then went on to talk about his long history with Bloomberg that I did not recall, where apparently they had to do retractions after he sued them, and they've tried this with him many, many times. What's going on here, man? Like, why on Thursday, March 13th, are the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg posting straight up fake news about Trump and Binance?
Might you have just answered your own question? It's who knows? I think that one could be forgiven for thinking that the sourcing standards are perhaps a little bit less when it comes to rumors about the Trump family right now in the U.S. as relates to popular media. It's a juicy story if it's real. To be fair to the media side, the damn guy put out a coin with his name on it 5 seconds before becoming the president. So it's a little bit reasonable to think that there might be some interest in continued crypto engagement. So, I don't know, whatever. It's messy. I look, if you're looking for signs of nature healing, CZ popping up on Twitter, dropping fours is we got Ryan Selkis arguing with Brad Garlinghouse. We've got CZ dropping fours. Things are getting better. It's back to normal. Again, we just need some new people to learn what these things actually mean.
I didn't catch the Selkless Garlinghouse, whatever round this is. Maybe it's round 7, Rumble in the Jungle. I don't know which one we're now calling it. But I remember when those guys were like best friends.
Well, yeah, but before that, they were sworn enemies again.
I know, but I was at Masari. I think maybe I said it here, but like a couple years ago, and they did the dunk tank together. I was like hosting the dunk tank, and Garlinghouse ran up and dunked him, and they hugged all wet and stuff. I mean, these guys were buddies.
Yeah. It's look, they seem to have a particular relationship. It works for them, and so who am I to judge?
I don't judge anyone else's marriage. Whatever works for them, works for them. All right, guys, that's all we got for you today. Of course, check out the breakdown and follow NLW on X, YouTube, and everywhere else that you can listen to these amazing podcasts. He goes into much deeper detail on all of these topics, even than we do here, man. Thank you so much. Otherwise, I guess we'll see everyone next week. Peace,
Later,
guys.
Let's go.